There are moments in the life of a space marine when death would be a mercy, when bones shatter beyond even the apothecary's skill to mend, when organs liquefy under weapons that should never have been conceived, when flesh burns away until there is barely enough left to call human. In these moments, the Emperor's angels of death face a choice that is not truly a choice at all. They can embrace the final darkness, their gene seed harvested for future generations, their names carved into halls of remembrance. Or they can continue to serve in a form that some call honor and others call damnation. They can become dreadnoughts. To the citizens of the Imperium, these towering war machines are symbols of eternal service, walking testaments to dedication that transcends death itself. They stride across battlefields like gods of war, assault cannons thundering, power fists crushing tanks and monsters alike. Children hear tales of ancient heroes who fought beside the Primarchs 10,000 years ago and still walk among the living, encased in adamantium and ceramite. The propaganda is beautiful in its simplicity. Even in death, I still serve. The words are inscribed on every dreadnought chassis, a promise etched in metal and faith. But propaganda never speaks of the cost. It never mentions the psychological horror of watching your body rot away inside a metal tomb. It never describes the sensation of breathing amniotic fluid instead of air, of feeling nothing where your limbs used to be, of screaming without a mouth that still works. The Imperium needs its dreadnoughts, these walking relics who carry centuries of tactical knowledge and whose very presence can turn the tide of battle. But the Imperium rarely considers what it means to be that weapon, to exist suspended between life and death, between human and machine, for decades or centuries or millennia. This is the story of the first year. The story of what happens when a space marine opens his eyes for the first time inside a sarcophagus and realizes that everything he was has been taken from him. The story of transformation, both physical and mental, as a warrior becomes something else entirely. The story of the price paid by those who are denied the Emperor's peace. The Adeptus Astartes are humanity's finest warriors, created through countless surgeries and genetic modifications that transform ordinary boys into transhuman killing machines. Their bones are reinforced with ceramite-laced structures. Their organs are duplicated or enhanced beyond normal human capacity. They possess 2 hearts, 3 lungs, acid-neutralizing glands, and the ability to process toxins that would kill a normal human instantly. They can survive in the vacuum of space for limited periods. They can eat the brains of the dead and absorb their memories. They are designed to endure conditions that would destroy lesser beings. But even space marines can be broken. A direct hit from a plasma weapon can melt through power armor and reduce the flesh beneath to slag. Tyrannid bioacid can dissolve ceramite and the warrior inside. Orc power claws can tear through even reinforced bone. When a space marine falls in battle, the apothecaries rush to recover the gene seed implanted within his body, those precious organs that will create the next generation of warriors. Sometimes that is all that can be saved. Sometimes, however, there is something more. A spark of consciousness. A will that refuses to die. A strategic mind too valuable to lose. The decision to enter a fallen space marine within a dreadnought chassis is never made lightly. The process is expensive, requiring ancient technology that the Imperium can barely maintain, let alone replicate. Each dreadnought represents centuries of accumulated knowledge and craftsmanship, a fusion of archaeotech and desperate innovation. More importantly, the process is permanent and irreversible. Once a marine is sealed within the sarcophagus, he can never leave. His organic body will continue to deteriorate, kept alive by artificial means until eventually nothing remains but a brain and a few essential organs floating in nutrient-rich fluid. Chapter masters and senior chaplains gather when such decisions must be made. They consider the warrior's service record, his tactical acumen, his knowledge of the chapter's ways. They weigh his potential value against the cost of the chassis and the long-term psychological toll. Some chapters are more willing to commit warriors to this fate than others. The Blood Angels, cursed with genetic flaws that drive them toward madness, sometimes see Dreadnought interment as a way to preserve their most noble warriors before the Black Rage claims them. The Space Wolves, with their fierce independence and pack mentality, are more reluctant to condemn a brother to eternal isolation. The Ultramarines, ever practical, calculate probabilities and strategic advantages with cold precision. But regardless of chapter traditions or tactical considerations, the fundamental question remains the same. Is this warrior worth saving? And more disturbingly, does he deserve what comes next? The breaking point. The moment arrives without warning, as it always does. One instant, a Space Marine is fighting with all the skill and fury that 200 years of training can provide. The next, something goes catastrophically wrong. Perhaps an enemy Chaos Sorcerer unleashes warp lightning that tears through his squad, leaving him as the only survivor with his spine shattered and his legs reduced to charred stumps. Perhaps a Tyrannid warrior organism's bioplasma strikes him full in the chest, melting through his power armor and liquefying everything beneath. Perhaps he makes the heroic choice to hold a position against impossible odds, buying time for his brothers to complete their mission, knowing that he will not survive the sacrifice. The details vary, but the outcome is always the same. Catastrophic injury, massive trauma that even the enhanced physiology of a Space Marine cannot heal. The kind of damage that should mean death, but, due to some combination of superhuman endurance and sheer stubborn will, does not quite finish the job. When the apothecaries arrive, they work with practiced efficiency. Stimulants flood the ruined body, keeping consciousness from fading entirely. Auto-injectors deliver pain suppressants, though the agony still breaks through in waves that would drive a normal human into shock. The Narthecium, that specialized surgical tool carried by every apothecary, extends its drills and extractors to claim the all-important gene seed. The progenoid glands are carefully removed and sealed in stasis containers. The future of the chapter must be preserved, regardless of what happens to this particular warrior. But as the apothecary works, he notices something. The warrior's eyes still track movement. His vital signs, though horrifically damaged, maintain a rhythm that suggests the possibility of survival. His lips move, forming words in battle cant that indicate his mind remains intact despite the devastation of his body. And the apothecary makes a choice. Instead of granting the Emperor's peace with a bolt round to the brain, he activates his Vox link and speaks words that will change this warrior's existence forever. The response comes within minutes. A specially equipped transport arrives, carrying preservation equipment that most Imperial Guard regiments have never seen. The dying Marine is loaded into a cryostasis unit that drops his temperature to near freezing, slowing his metabolism to a crawl. Chemical cocktails flood his system, keeping his brain oxygenated while his heart struggled to pump blood through a body that is more ruin than flesh. And as consciousness finally fades, the last thing the warrior hears is a chaplain's voice speaking words that might be benediction or condemnation. Your service continues, brother. The Emperor has need of you still. The surgery. What follows is not healing. The surgical process that transforms a broken Space Marine into a Dreadnought pilot is amputation on a scale that defies comprehension. It is the systematic dismantling of a body until only the absolute minimum necessary for consciousness remains. The Tech Marines and apothecaries who perform this work approach it with the detachment of engineers maintaining a weapon system, because to see it as anything else would be to acknowledge the horror of what they do. The patient is kept in a state of controlled unconsciousness throughout most of the procedure, drugged into a twilight realm where pain exists, but meaning does not. His remaining limbs are removed first. Arms that once wielded chainsaws and bolters are severed at the shoulder. Legs that carried him across 1,000 battlefields are cut away at the hip. The surgeons work with precision, sealing blood vessels and nerve endings, ensuring that the truncated stumps will interface properly with the cybernetic systems that will replace them. Internal organs that can be sacrificed are removed next. The Space Marine's enhanced physiology means he has redundancies that normal humans lack, and these are stripped away without hesitation. One heart is enough when the sarcophagus will regulate blood flow. One lung will suffice when the life support systems handle oxygenation. The digestive system is largely unnecessary when nutrients will be fed directly into the bloodstream. Piece by piece, the unnecessary flesh is discarded, harvested for potential use in other procedures, or simply incinerated as medical waste. What remains is barely recognizable as human. A torso reduced to ribs and organs. A head now grotesquely disproportionate to the shrunken body beneath it. The spinal column, carefully preserved because it carries the neural pathways that will interface with the Dreadnought systems. This remnant is placed into the sarcophagus, a coffin-like container approximately the size of a large man's torso, lined with connection ports and life support equipment. The sarcophagus is filled with amniotic fluid, a thick, nutrient-rich substance that will sustain the pilot's remaining flesh for decades or centuries to come. Tubes are inserted into major blood vessels, creating artificial circulation. Catheters handle waste elimination. Neural interface cables burrow into the spinal column, seeking the specific nerve clusters that will allow the pilot to control his new body. The black carapace, that layer of interface material implanted in all Space Marines to connect them to their power armor, is forcibly adapted to bind with the Dreadnought systems, creating a neural feedback loop that should allow control as natural as moving one's own limbs. Should. The theory is elegant. The reality is far messier. As the final connections are made and the sarcophagus is sealed, ancient rituals are performed. Tech priests chant the litany of awakening while burning sacred oils. Chaplains recite prayers for the pilot's soul, asking the Emperor to grant strength for the trials ahead. The sarcophagus is blessed with holy water and marked with purity seals. And then, slowly, carefully, the life support systems are activated and the sedation is reduced. Consciousness returns like drowning in reverse. The first awakening. There is no gentle transition from unconsciousness to awareness. One moment there is nothing. The next, there is everything, all at once, overwhelming and incomprehensible. The first sensation is wrongness. Every instinct screams that something is fundamentally broken, that the body has been violated in ways that the mind cannot process. The Marine tries to move, to sit up, to do anything, and nothing responds. Or rather, everything responds, but not in ways that make sense. He tries to lift his arm and feels metal servos engaging somewhere far away from where his arm should be. He tries to breathe and feels liquid flowing in and out of his lungs, instead of air, thick and cold and wrong. He tries to open his eyes and instead receives a flood of sensory data from optical sensors that paint the world in spectrum ranges that human eyes were never meant to perceive. Infrared signatures, motion tracking overlays, tactical data streams, range-finding calculations. All of it crashes into a mind that is still trying to process reality in terms of flesh and blood. Panic is immediate and total. The Marine tries to scream and hears a mechanical vocalization crackling from external speakers, his voice translated into electronic approximation by systems he does not yet understand how to control. He thrashes, or tries to, and feels the Dreadnought's massive limbs shift slightly within their restraints. The world tilts and spins as his new senses feed him information his brain cannot pass. His two hearts, or perhaps only the one heart that remains, pound against his chest in a rhythm that feels alien and arrhythmic. "Peace, brother." A voice cuts through the chaos, calm and measured. The Marine tries to locate the speaker and finds himself looking through multiple visual feeds simultaneously. He can see the tech marine standing before him, but he can also see thermal signatures, motion vectors, targeting data. The information overload is staggering. Do not try to move yet. Your neural adaptation is not complete. Focus on my voice. Remember your training. Training. The word anchors something in the swirling chaos of sensation. Space Marines are trained to operate through pain, through sensory deprivation, through conditions that would shatter lesser minds. The Marine reaches for those disciplines now, forcing his consciousness to narrow and focus. He stops trying to move. He stops trying to make sense of all the data flooding his awareness. He simply breathes, or does what passes for breathing now, and lets his enhanced mind begin to process and categorize the incoming information. Slowly, incrementally, patterns emerge from the noise. The optical sensors resolve into something approaching normal vision, though with overlays and additional data that will take time to filter and understand. The proprioceptive feedback from the Dreadnought's body begins to map onto his spatial awareness, creating a sense of where his limbs are, even though they are no longer the limbs he was born with. The amniotic fluid in his lungs stops feeling like drowning and starts feeling like a new normal, thick and cold, but functional. Better, the tech marine says, and the Marine realizes he can now track the source of the voice without his vision fragmenting into a dozen different feeds. You are experiencing standard neural shock from the interface. This is expected. Your enhanced neurology will adapt within days, but the initial adjustment period is always difficult. Can you understand me? The Marine tries to speak and hears that mechanical voice again, but this time he can feel the connection between his intent and the sound. The words are his, even if the voice is not. I understand. The vocalization is flat, emotionless, filtered through synthesizers and mechanical speakers. He hates the sound of it immediately. Good. I am Tech Marine Hadrius. You have been successfully interred within a Castroferrum Pattern Mark V Dreadnought chassis. The surgery was completed 4 hours ago. Your organic systems are stable. Your neural integration is proceeding within acceptable parameters. The Tech Marine pauses, and there is something in that pause that suggests he has said these words before, many times, to many warriors who woke in this same nightmarish situation. Do you remember who you are? The question strikes like a physical blow. Does he remember? The Marine searches his memories and finds them there, intact but somehow distant, as if they belong to someone else. He remembers his name. He remembers his squad, his company, his chapter. He remembers the battle where he fell, the pain, the moment when everything went wrong. The memories are all present, but they feel thin, like looking at events through fog or recalling a dream rather than lived experience. I am... His mechanical voice hesitates. I was Brother Sergeant Tharian, 3rd Company, Devastator Squad, Kronos. The past tense is deliberate. He is not certain he can claim to be that person anymore. You are still Tharian, the Tech Marine corrects, though there is something in his tone that suggests even he does not entirely believe the words. You have been chosen for a great honor. Your knowledge and experience are too valuable to lose. You will continue to serve the Emperor in this new form. You will be venerated as one of the ancients, a living connection to our chapter's history. The words are meant to be comforting, but all Tharian can focus on is that phrase, this new form. He tries to assess his body and receives a cascade of diagnostic data instead. Armor integrity at 98%. Power core output nominal. Weapon systems armed and ready. Hydraulic pressure within acceptable ranges. He can feel the massive frame of the Dreadnought around him, or rather within him, as if he has somehow been inserted into the heart of a walking fortress. His awareness extends to the very edges of the ceramite plating, to the tips of the assault cannon and the fingers of the power fist. But he cannot feel his own hands. He cannot feel his own legs. He cannot feel anything that was once his own flesh, except for the small, broken remnant that floats in amniotic fluid at the center of this machine. How much? The question emerges before Tharian can stop it. How much of me remains? Tech Marine Hadrius does not answer immediately. When he does speak, his words are clinical, precise, the language of someone reporting on a piece of equipment rather than a brother space marine. Your brain, spinal column, and portions of your nervous system are intact. One heart, one lung, approximately 15% of your original muscle mass, though it will continue to atrophy over time. Your organic components are sustained by the sarcophagus life support systems. They are sufficient for neural function, which is all that is required. 15%. Tharion tries to comprehend what that means. 85% of his body is simply gone, cut away and discarded like faulty machinery. What remains of him could fit inside a container barely larger than a coffin. And yet somehow this is called service. Somehow this is called honor. I want to see. The words come out before Tharion can consider whether he truly wants this. Show me what I have become. There is a long silence. Then Tech Marine Hadrius nods and gestures to one of his servitors. The mindless cyborg servant brings a full-length reflective panel, positioning it before the Dreadnought chassis. And for the first time, Tharion sees himself. The Dreadnought is enormous, standing perhaps twice the height of a standard space marine, and far broader. Its armored torso is a massive block of ceramite and adamantium, painted in the colors of his chapter and marked with honor scrolls and purity seals. The right arm terminates in an assault cannon, a rotating multi-barreled weapon that can spit hundreds of mass-reactive shells per minute. The left arm is a power fist, a siege hammer of a weapon capable of crushing tanks and tearing through fortifications. The head, if it can be called that, is an armored sensor array set into the upper torso, giving the Dreadnought a hunched, aggressive posture. Somewhere inside that metal mountain, buried at its heart, is what remains of Brother Sergeant Tharion. He cannot see his own sarcophagus from this angle, cannot see the small coffin that contains his ruined flesh. All he can see is the weapon he has become. And despite every discipline, despite every mental training technique the chapter's librarians ever taught him, Tharion feels something break inside his mind. A sound emerges from the Dreadnought's external speakers, a mechanical keening that might be a scream or a sob or something for which human language has no name. Tech Marine Hadrius deactivates the reflective panel and dismisses the servitor with a gesture. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of someone who has witnessed this scene many times before. The first day is always the hardest, brother. Your mind will adapt. The neural pathways will strengthen. What feels alien now will become natural. In time, you will forget what it felt like to be limited to mere flesh. But Tharion barely hears him, because in that moment, looking at his new form, he understands with perfect clarity what has been done to him. He has not been saved. He has been transformed into a weapon, and weapons do not get to choose when they are used or when they are allowed to rest. Weapons exist to serve. And if the weapon happens to contain the ghost of a man who once had dreams and fears and the capacity to feel the sun on his face, well, that is simply the price of eternal service. The first week time moves strangely in the first days following interment. For a space marine accustomed to counting time by the rhythm of two hearts beating, by the cycle of sleeping and waking, by the passage of days marked by training and combat and brotherhood, the new existence inside a sarcophagus is profoundly disorienting. There is no day or night here. The amniotic fluid maintains a constant temperature. The life support systems hum with an unchanging rhythm. External time passes, measured by chronometers and tactical displays, but it feels abstract and disconnected from any lived experience. Tharion drifts in and out of something that is not quite sleep, but also not full waking consciousness. The Tech Marines have told him this is normal, that his brain is still adjusting to the neural load of controlling a body that masses several tons and operates on principles completely foreign to human physiology. They assure him that the fugue states will become less frequent as his mind strengthens the new pathways. But knowing something intellectually and experiencing it are very different things. When he is conscious, really conscious, Tharion focuses on the exercises the Tech Marines have prescribed. Simple movements at first, learning to shift his weight without toppling, practicing gross motor control with the power fist, gripping training blocks without crushing them to powder. The assault cannon remains locked and unloaded for now. The Tech Marines insist that weapon training will come later, after he has mastered basic locomotion. The Dreadnought body responds to his will, but it requires conscious thought in ways that his original body never did. When he wants to take a step, he must think about the sequence of hydraulic activations and servo engagements that will shift his weight and move his leg. When he wants to raise his arm, he must consciously route the command through neural pathways that still feel foreign and uncomfortable. Everything that was once automatic now requires deliberate attention, but slowly, incrementally, progress happens. On the second day, Tharion manages to walk the length of the Tech Marine forge without losing his balance. On the third day, he successfully picks up a training bolt shell with his power fist, holding the small object delicately enough not to crush it. On the fourth day, he speaks a full sentence without the mechanical vocalization glitching or distorting. These are tiny victories, pathetic when measured against what he once was capable of, but they are all he has. The visits begin on the fifth day. Chapter Master Calum himself comes to the forge, accompanied by Chaplain Morteus. Tharion tries to stand at attention, an automatic response drilled into him by 2 centuries of service, and nearly topples sideways before catching himself. The indignity burns, but the chapter master shows no reaction. "Brother Tharion," Calum's voice carries the weight of authority that comes from leading warriors for 400 years. "The chapter rejoices to see you returned to service. Your sacrifice at the gates of Kandor saved 3 full squads. The enemy was broken and the objective secured. You upheld the highest traditions of our brotherhood." The words should feel like praise, but all Tharion can focus on is that word. Returned. As if he ever left. As if this metal tomb is somehow a continuation of his previous existence, rather than something fundamentally different. "I only did my duty, my lord," Tharion responds, the mechanical voice still grating on his awareness. "And you shall continue to do so," Chaplain Morteus intones, stepping forward. The skull-faced helmet regards Tharion with empty eye sockets. "You have been given a rare gift, brother. While others fall and are lost forever, you have been granted the chance to serve beyond death itself. The Emperor has special purposes for those he preserves in this manner. You will fight battles that would break lesser warriors. You will witness victories that will be sung of for generations. And one day, perhaps centuries from now, when you finally fall in glorious combat, your name will be remembered alongside the greatest heroes our chapter has ever known." The chaplain's words paint a picture of glory and eternal service, but Tharion cannot help but notice what is not said. There is no mention of rest, no suggestion that there will ever be a time when he is allowed to simply stop. The Dreadnought chassis is built to last for millennia, maintained by the Tech Marines with religious devotion, repaired after every battle. As long as the sarcophagus remains intact, as long as his brain continues to function, he will serve. The only end that awaits him is catastrophic destruction in combat. Until that day comes, he will be awakened when needed, deployed when necessary, and placed back into stasis when his service is complete. It is eternal servitude, dressed up in the language of honor. After the chapter master and chaplain depart, Tharion is left alone with his thoughts. Or rather, he wishes he were alone. But a dreadnought is never truly alone. The Tech Marines constantly monitor his systems remotely. Servitors move through the forge, performing maintenance on nearby equipment. And in his own mind, there is the constant awareness of the machine spirits that inhabit the dreadnought systems. Artificial intelligences or psychic echoes, or whatever they truly are, whispering at the edges of his consciousness. The machine spirits are supposed to be allies, helpful presences that aid the Dreadnought in targeting and movement and tactical analysis. But Tharion finds them unsettling. They feel alien, other, things that think in patterns of mathematics and logic, rather than emotion or human reasoning. Sometimes he catches fragments of their processing, streams of data and calculations that his enhanced mind can almost comprehend but not quite. They analyze every movement he makes, every command he gives, suggesting optimizations and corrections in ways that feel like criticism. By the 6th day, Tharion has advanced to live-fire exercises with the assault cannon. The weapon system connects to his consciousness with surprising ease, as if his brain recognizes it as just another limb to control. When he wills the cannon to fire, it does so with the same immediacy as flexing a finger once would have. The heavy shells tear through target silhouettes with devastating efficiency, and Tharion feels something that might be satisfaction, or might just be the machine spirit's approval echoing through the neural link. But satisfaction is cold comfort when every other aspect of existence feels like a waking nightmare. The amniotic fluid in his lungs never stops feeling wrong. The sensation of his body, what little remains of it, continues to atrophy despite the nutrient feeds, muscle turning to useless mass that serves no purpose except to house the few organs he still needs. Every few hours, waste is automatically purged from his system by tubes and filters, a process that happens without his input or control, stripping away even the basic dignity of bodily autonomy. Worst of all are the phantom sensations. His brain insists that he still has hands, even though his hands were severed days ago and incinerated as medical waste. He feels itches on legs that no longer exist. Sometimes he swears he can feel pain in his missing arm, a burning sensation that has no source and cannot be relieved. The tech marines tell him these phantom pains will fade with time as his brain accepts the new reality. But for now, they are constant reminders of everything he has lost. On the 7th day, Brother Sergeant Marcus visits. Marcus was Tharion's squad leader before the promotion to Devastator Sergeant split them into different units. They have fought together for nearly a century, survived battles that killed better warriors, and shared the kind of bond that only comes from trusting someone with your life repeatedly. If anyone can understand what Tharion is going through, it should be Marcus. But when Marcus enters the forge and sees the Dreadnought, something changes in his expression. It is subtle, barely noticeable, but Tharion's new optical sensors pick up every micro-expression. There is recognition, yes, and relief that his old friend survived. But there is also something else. Pity, perhaps, or discomfort, or the dawning realization that the person he knew is gone, replaced by this massive war machine that happens to contain fragments of that person's consciousness. Tharion, Marcus says, and his voice is carefully controlled, the tone someone might use when speaking to a child or an invalid. It is good to see you functional again. The chapter has missed your tactical expertise. The words are kind, but the distance in them is unmistakable. Marcus does not approach close to the Dreadnought. He does not reach out or make any of the small gestures of brotherhood that Space Marines use to acknowledge their bonds. He stays at a respectful distance, treating Tharion less like a battle brother and more like a revered ancestor or a holy relic. "And I have missed the field," Tharion responds, though the mechanical voice makes it impossible to convey the complex emotions behind the words. "Tech Marine Hadrius says I will be cleared for combat operations within the month." "The enemy will learn to fear your coming," Marcus says, and there is genuine conviction in his voice. "A Dreadnought in the line can turn any battle. Your firepower alone equals that of a full tactical squad." They talk for a while longer, discussing chapter business and recent deployments, but the conversation feels hollow. Marcus is genuinely trying to treat this as a normal interaction between brothers. But nothing about this situation is normal. Tharion towers over him, a massive engine of war barely able to fit inside the forge. Every movement Tharion makes is accompanied by the whine of servos and the hiss of hydraulics. When he speaks, it is with a voice that sounds nothing like it once did. The disconnect is total and undeniable. When Marcus finally takes his leave, citing duties that need attention, Tharion is left with the uncomfortable certainty that their brotherhood has fundamentally changed. Marcus will always remember who Tharion was, will always honor the battles they fought together, but the person Marcus knew is effectively dead. What remains is a weapon that happens to carry that person's memories and consciousness. And while the weapon might be respected and even revered, it will never again be treated as an equal or a friend. That night, if night has any meaning in the unchanging environment of the Forge, Tharion experiences his first true stasis sleep. The Tech Marines initiate the shutdown sequence, gradually reducing his consciousness to minimal levels while the sarcophagus systems enter maintenance mode. It is not like normal sleep. There are no dreams, or if there are, he does not remember them. There is only a void, and then awakening 8 hours later with no sense that any time has passed at all. The experience is profoundly unsettling. 8 hours have vanished as if they never existed. Tharion understands intellectually that this is what stasis sleep will be like when he is placed in long-term storage between deployments. Days or weeks or even years could pass in what feels like an instant. And he realizes, with growing horror, that he could lose vast stretches of time without ever being aware they had gone. The universe could age around him while he remained frozen, unchanging, until the day when he is awakened because someone has decided that his particular skills are needed for a battle. By the end of the first week, Tharion has achieved basic proficiency in controlling his new body. He can walk without falling. He can manipulate objects with reasonable precision. He can fire the assault cannon with accuracy that would make any devastator proud. By all objective measures, the interment has been a success. He is functional, combat-ready, a valuable asset to the chapter. But success is measured in capability, not in cost. And the cost is everything Tharion once was. His humanity, his autonomy, his future, his identity. All of it sacrificed on the altar of eternal service. All of it deemed acceptable losses in the Imperium's endless war for survival. And the worst part, the truly damning part, is that Tharion knows he will continue. Because he is still a Space Marine, and Space Marines do not abandon their duty. Because refusing to fight is not an option that exists within his psychological conditioning. Because what else is there to do except continue serving until catastrophic damage finally grants the oblivion that should have come on the battlefield where he fell. The first week ends as it began, with a warrior trapped in a metal tomb, pretending that honor and service are adequate compensation for everything that has been taken from him. And ahead stretches the rest of the year, and the decades beyond, and the centuries that might follow if he proves durable enough. Even in death, I still serve. The words mock him now, because death would have been kinder than this eternal half-life. But the Imperium does not deal in kindness, it deals in necessity. And Brother Tharion has been deemed necessary, whether he wants to be or not. The physical reality. The sarcophagus that contains what remains of Brother Tharion measures approximately 2 meters in length, 1 meter in width, and 1 meter in depth. It is constructed from reinforced ceramite and adamantium, designed to withstand impacts that would obliterate lesser armored vehicles. Within this coffin-sized container, suspended in amniotic fluid, floats the remnant of a Space Marine who once stood over 2 meters tall and weighed close to 300 kilograms of enhanced muscle and bone. What remains barely qualifies as a body. The torso has been reduced to a cage of ribs protecting essential organs. The heart, one of 2 original organs that once pumped blood with superhuman efficiency, continues its rhythm in isolation, aided by artificial regulators that maintain pressure and flow. The lung expands and contracts, drawing in the thick amniotic fluid that now serves as both atmosphere and nutrient medium. The digestive system has been largely removed, deemed unnecessary when nutrition is delivered directly into the bloodstream through intravenous feeds. The spinal column remains, carefully preserved, because it houses the neural pathways essential for interfacing with the Dreadnought's control systems. Branching from it are nerve clusters that once controlled limbs that no longer exist, repurposed now to send commands to hydraulic systems and weapon mounts. The head is grotesquely disproportionate to the shriveled body beneath it, skull containing an enhanced brain that processes tactical data and sensory input from a dozen different systems simultaneously. The amniotic fluid itself is a marvel of biochemical engineering, though to experience it from the inside is to exist in a state of perpetual drowning. It is thick, viscous, tasting of salt and chemicals when Tharion's tongue moves against it. His lung pumps it in and out, extracting oxygen from the oxygenated liquid in a process that never stops feeling fundamentally wrong. Normal breathing, the instinctive expansion of lungs to draw in air, is a memory now. This new respiration is mechanical, regulated by systems that monitor blood oxygenation levels and adjust the fluid circulation accordingly. The fluid serves multiple purposes beyond respiration. It maintains constant pressure against the pilot's remaining flesh, preventing the kind of tissue damage that would occur in a zero-gravity environment. It conducts nutrients that keep the organs functioning despite the absence of a digestive system. It removes metabolic waste products, filtering toxins through a series of microscopic tubes that connect to purification systems outside the sarcophagus. And perhaps most importantly, it maintains a constant temperature, preventing the pilot from experiencing the extremes of heat and cold that the Dreadnought might encounter in combat. But these practical functions do nothing to alleviate the psychological horror of existence within the fluid. Tharion cannot feel his body in any normal sense. The proprioceptive feedback that once told him where his limbs were in space has been replaced by mechanical analogues that measure joint angles and servo tensions. When he tries to move what used to be his arm, he receives data about hydraulic pressure and actuator positioning. The sensation of touch has been reduced to contact sensors and pressure readings. His entire physical existence has been translated into numbers and measurements. The neural interface cables are perhaps the worst violation. They burrow into his spinal column at specific points, connecting directly to nerve clusters, with an intimacy that makes Tharion feel like he has been impaled. 27 separate cables, according to TechMarine Hadrius, each one carrying different streams of data between his nervous system and the Dreadnought's control mechanisms. He can feel them when he concentrates, foreign objects embedded in his flesh that should trigger rejection responses, but are held in place by the same black carapace technology that once let him interface with his power armor. The black carapace, that layer of subdermal implant that all space marines receive during their transformation from human to Astartes, was designed to create a neural link with power armor. It allowed a marine to control his armor's functions as naturally as his own body, to feel through its sensors as if they were extensions of his own senses. But what was meant as an enhancement has become a prison. The black carapace has been forcibly adapted, stretched, and modified by the tech marines to interface with systems far more complex than any suit of armor. Now, it binds Tharion to the Dreadnought with a completeness that goes beyond physical connection. His nervous system and the machine systems have merged, creating a hybrid consciousness that is neither fully human nor fully mechanical. Sensory input is overwhelming and inadequate in equal measure. Tharion can see through the Dreadnought's optical arrays, but the world they show him is nothing like normal vision. The sensors operate across multiple spectrum ranges simultaneously, painting reality in infrared heat signatures, motion tracking overlays, electromagnetic radiation patterns, and tactical data streams. His enhanced brain can process all of this information, categorizing and interpreting the flood of data, but it is exhausting in ways that normal sight never was. He sees more than any human could, and somehow feels more blind than he ever did before. Hearing is similarly distorted. The Dreadnought's audio sensors pick up frequencies far beyond normal human range, from subsonic vibrations that travel through solid ground to ultrasonic emissions from electronic equipment. Conversations sound flat and artificial, filtered through speakers and reproduced as digital approximations. Music, if he were to hear any, would be rendered as pure data, frequency and amplitude measurements that his brain must consciously translate into something approaching the experience of sound. Touch, that most fundamental of human senses, has been reduced to crude pressure readings and impact detection. When the Dreadnought's power fist closes around an object, Tharion receives numerical feedback about grip strength and contact surface area. He can measure exactly how much force he is applying, can calculate to the kilogram how much pressure an object can withstand before breaking. But he cannot feel texture. He cannot sense temperature through the armored plating. The tactile richness of physical interaction has been replaced by mechanical precision, and something fundamental has been lost in the translation. The atrophy is perhaps the cruelest aspect of physical existence within the sarcophagus. Without use, muscle tissue degenerates. The remnant of Tharion's body, floating in amniotic fluid with no weight to bear and no movements to perform, withers day by day. The tech marines assure him that this is normal, that the muscles serve no purpose now and their degradation will not affect his ability to function. But Tharion can feel it happening, can sense the weakness spreading through flesh that was once capable of crushing orc skulls with bare hands. The skin itself becomes thin and pale, never exposed to sunlight or environmental stress. Small wounds take longer to heal, the body's regenerative capabilities diminished by the artificial environment and the constant chemical interventions. Bone. Density decreases despite the calcium supplements added to the amniotic fluid. The immune system, once enhanced to fight off infections that would kill normal humans, struggles against the constant presence of foreign objects and artificial systems. And there is pain. The tech marines claim that pain receptors can be dulled or disabled entirely through chemical regulation, but Tharion refuses the option. Pain is proof that some part of him remains organic, remains human. The phantom sensations of missing limbs, the constant low-grade ache from neural interface insertion points, the occasional sharp spikes when systems malfunction or require recalibration, all of it reminds him that he has not been entirely consumed by the machine. Not yet. But perhaps the most disturbing physical reality is the complete absence of normal biological rhythms. There is no hunger, because nutrition is delivered automatically through intravenous feeds. There is no thirst, because fluid balance is maintained by the sarcophagus systems. There is no need for sleep in any normal sense, though the tech marines insist on shutdown cycles to prevent neural degradation. Waste elimination happens without conscious input or control, tubes and filters handling bodily functions that were once as private as they were necessary. The result is an existence divorced from biology, from the basic physical experiences that define human life. Tharion does not eat, he does not sleep, he does not experience the simple pleasure of stretching after rest or the satisfaction of physical exertion. He exists in a state of perpetual suspension, his body maintained at minimum viable function, while his consciousness is forced to operate within the context of a massive war machine. During his second week of existence as a Dreadnought, Tharion makes the mistake of asking Tech Marine Hadrius how long the sarcophagus can sustain him. The answer is delivered with the same clinical detachment that characterizes all of the Tech Marine's explanations. Indefinitely, barring catastrophic damage. The sarcophagus systems are designed for millennia of operation. Nutrient reserves can be replenished. Waste filtration can be maintained. As long as your brain remains viable and the life support systems function, you can continue serving. Indefinitely. The word echoes in Tharion's mind like a death sentence. Not a sentence measured in years or even decades, but in the abstract eternity of as long as necessary. He could exist in this state for 1,000 years if the machine spirits favor him and the enemy's weapons fail to find his vulnerable core. 10,000 years even, like the legendary Bjorn the Fell-Handed of the Space Wolves, who has served since the time of the Horus Heresy. The thought should inspire awe or determination. Instead, it fills Tharion with a horror so profound that he cannot give it name, because 10,000 years of this would be hell in the most literal sense. 10,000 years of floating in amniotic fluid. 10,000 years of phantom pains and sensory dislocation. 10,000 years of watching everyone he knows age and die while he remains frozen in this metal tomb. But duty does not ask if the burden is bearable. Duty simply is. And Tharion is still enough of a space marine to understand that refusing duty is not an option his conditioning allows him to seriously consider. So he accepts the reality of his new existence, this physical nightmare dressed up in the language of honor and service. He breathes liquid instead of air. He sees in spectrums that have no names. He exists as a ghost in a machine, a consciousness trapped in rotting flesh that is itself trapped in an adamantium coffin. Even in death, I still serve. But this is not death. Death would be a mercy. This is something far worse. This is eternal existence at the absolute minimum threshold of life, consciousness preserved in order to make the weapon more effective. And the weapon does not get to choose when or how it is used. The physical reality of being a dreadnought is, in every meaningful sense, a living death. And Tharion has only begun to understand the full scope of what that means. The first deployment. The call comes 3 weeks after Tharion's interment. An Orc warband has been detected on the mining world of Ferrus Quintus, their crude vessels descending through the atmosphere to raid Imperial installations. The threat is significant but manageable, precisely the sort of engagement where a newly awakened dreadnought can be deployed without risking catastrophic loss. Chapter Master Calum personally delivers the briefing, standing before the massive form of the dreadnought with tactical displays projected between them. Your deployment will be with Second Company in support of Captain Severus's assault on the primary landing zone, the Chapter Master explains. The Orcs have fortified a former Prometheum refinery. Your task is to breach their defensive line and clear the way for our brothers to advance. Think of it as a proving ground, ancient Tharion. Show the enemy what it means to face the Emperor's wrath incarnate. Ancient Tharion. The honorific still sounds wrong to his ears, or whatever passes for ears now. 3 weeks ago he was Brother Sergeant. Now he is Ancient, a title reserved for warriors who have served for centuries, for venerable heroes whose wisdom is sought in matters of war and doctrine. He has done nothing to earn such respect except survive his own mutilation. But he does not voice these thoughts. He simply acknowledges the orders with a mechanical affirmative and begins the process of preparation. Tech Marines swarm over his chassis, performing final system checks and loading blessed ammunition into his assault cannon. Chaplain Morteus arrives to administer the Litany of Battle, anointing the dreadnaught's armor with sacred oils, while reciting prayers that have been spoken before combat for 10,000 years. Tharion listens to the familiar words and feels nothing. Or perhaps he feels too much, but his mechanical body offers no outlet for the emotions churning inside what remains of his organic mind. The transport is a Thunderhawk gunship, its cargo bay large enough to accommodate the dreadnaught's massive frame. Maglocks secure his feet to the deck plating, and Tharion finds himself standing alongside a full tactical squad of his brothers. They are warriors he knows, or knew, from shared decades of service. But the easy camaraderie that once existed between them is gone now. They glance at him with a mixture of respect and unease, keeping a careful distance from the towering war machine in their midst. Brother Valen, who once stood shoulder to shoulder with Tharion in a dozen different shield walls, nods in acknowledgement, but says nothing. Brother Corvus, who survived the Castus campaign only because Tharion dragged his wounded form to the evacuation point, manages a brief, "Honor to serve alongside you, Ancient," before turning away. The others maintain a respectful silence, treating Tharion less like a comrade and more like a sacred relic being transported to battle. The disconnect is profound and isolating. Tharion wants to speak, to crack a joke or share some observation that would break the awkward silence, to do anything that might restore the sense of brotherhood that once defined his existence. But his mechanical voice seems wrong for such casual interaction, and he is increasingly aware that his new form inspires something other than kinship in his battle brothers. They see him as they would see a powerful weapon or a holy artifact, valuable and worthy of respect, but fundamentally other. The descent through Ferrus Quintus's atmosphere is violent, the Thunderhawk shaking and rattling as it encounters turbulence and enemy anti-air fire. Tharian's sarcophagus remains stable, gyroscopic stabilizers compensating for every jolt and impact, but he can feel the ship's movements translated through his mechanical body. Data streams update continuously, showing altitude, velocity, threat assessments, tactical layouts. His brain processes all of it automatically, cataloging and prioritizing information in ways that his organic mind alone never could. 30 seconds to drop zone, the pilot voxes. Prepare for hot extraction. The maglocks release, and the assault ramp drops before the Thunderhawk has fully landed. Tharian moves forward, his massive weight making the gunship's frame groan in protest, and steps out onto the surface of Ferrus Quintus. The tactical squad follows, fanning out to establish a perimeter, but Tharian barely notices them. His attention is consumed by the sensory data flooding his awareness. The orcs have turned the refinery into a makeshift fortress, crude barricades and looted Imperial equipment assembled into a defensive position that would be laughable if not for the sheer volume of firepower it represents. Dozens of the Arsal, green-skinned Xenos move through the complex, their crude weapons glinting in the harsh sunlight. Tharian's targeting systems automatically catalog threats, painting hostile signatures in his visual feed and calculating firing solutions. Ancient Tharian, Captain Severus's voice comes through the Vox network. You are cleared to engage. Show these Xenos filth what it means to face the Imperium's vengeance. For a moment, Tharian hesitates. This is it. The moment when he must function as a weapon rather than a warrior. When he must kill, not because he has chosen to fight, but because that is what he has been made for. The distinction feels important, even as he acknowledges its futility. He is a Dreadnought now. His purpose is to destroy. Everything else is secondary. The assault cannon spools up with a sound like thunder building in a bottle. Tharian focuses his will, and the weapon speaks. Heavy shells streak across the distance between him and the orc position, each one a mass-reactive round designed to penetrate armor and detonate inside the target. The barricade explodes in a spray of shrapnel and alien blood. Orcs scatter, their crude battle cries shifting from confidence to alarm, and Tharian advances. There is no fear in this form, no hesitation. The Dreadnought's armor can shrug off fire that would shred power armor. Its weapons can level fortifications. Its sheer mass turns it into a battering ram that nothing short of a battle tank can hope to stop. Tharian walks forward through a storm of enemy gunfire, his assault cannon never ceasing its mechanical roar, his power fist raised to crush anything foolish enough to come within reach. The orcs attempt to mount a defense, their crude rockets and heavy slugger weapons hammering against his chassis. Tharian registers the impacts as minor fluctuations in armor integrity, nothing that threatens his functionality. He targets the source of the heaviest fire and walks the assault cannon's fire across a cluster of orcs operating a looted Imperial autocannon. The Xenos disappear in a red mist, their weapon reduced to scrap metal. A massive orc, one of their nob leaders, charges forward with a power claw crackling with stolen Imperial technology. It is a weapon that could tear through a rhino's armor, and the orc wields it with the kind of strength that only their largest specimens possess. But Tharian does not dodge or retreat. He simply brings his power fist down in a hammer blow that flattens the orc into the ground with such force that the earth itself cracks. The fight becomes a slaughter. Without fear or pain, without the limitations of a flesh and blood body, Tharian advances through the orc position like a force of nature. His assault cannon empties its ammunition drum, and while servos automatically load a fresh one, He uses the power fist to tear through a barricade, crushing orcs beneath ceramite-clad metal fingers. When one of the Xenos manages to clamber onto his chassis, attempting to pry open access panels, Tharion simply flexes his frame and dislodges the creature, then crushes it underfoot without breaking stride. Behind him, the tactical squad follows in his wake, their bolters picking off survivors and securing the ground he has cleared. It is textbook breakthrough tactics. The heavy unit creates the opening and the infantry exploits it. But there is something deeply wrong about the clinical efficiency of it all. Tharion is not fighting so much as executing a programmed response. Threat identification, target acquisition, elimination. The cycle repeats with machine-like precision. He realizes, with disturbing clarity, that he feels nothing. The satisfaction that once came from a clean shot, the surge of combat adrenaline, the fierce joy of testing his skills against a worthy opponent, all of it is absent. There is only the cold calculation of tactical necessity and the mechanical process of destroying designated targets. He is functioning exactly as a dreadnought should, and he hates every second of it. The battle is over in less than 15 minutes. The orc position is destroyed, the Xenos either dead or fleeing into the wasteland beyond the refinery. Captain Severus voxes his congratulations, commending the dreadnought's effectiveness and confirming that objectives have been achieved with minimal casualties among the tactical squads. From any tactical perspective, the engagement has been a complete success. But as Tharion stands amid the carnage, his chassis spattered with alien blood and debris, he cannot shake the sense of profound wrongness. He has just participated in combat for the first time in his new form, and it felt like nothing, worse than nothing. It felt like being a spectator in his own body, watching through remote sensors as a weapon system performed its designated function. Brother Valen approaches, his bolter slung and his helmet removed so he can survey the battlefield with human eyes. He looks up at the towering dreadnought and speaks words that are clearly meant to be encouraging. "You fought with the fury of the Emperor himself, Ancient. The greenskins broke before you like water before stone. It was an honor to witness." An honor to witness, not to fight alongside. To witness, as one might witness a particularly impressive display of artillery fire or a well-executed orbital bombardment. Tharion wants to explain that there was no fury in his fighting, no emotion at all, just mechanical execution of targeting protocols. He wants to express the hollow feeling that comes from killing without consequence or cost. But his mechanical voice makes such nuanced communication impossible, or perhaps he simply lacks the words for what he is experiencing. "The Emperor's enemies fall regardless of the instrument of their demise," Tharion responds, the words coming out flat and formal. It is the kind of thing a dreadnought is supposed to say, the platitude of a weapon that has accepted its purpose. The return journey to the strike cruiser is accomplished in silence. Tharion is loaded back into the Thunderhawk's cargo bay, mag-locked into position for the ascent through the atmosphere. The tactical squad boards around him, their armor scorched and dented, but their spirits high from a successful engagement. They trade war stories and congratulate each other on particularly fine shots. Tharion listens, but does not participate. He is present, but not part of the brotherhood, included in the mission, but excluded from the camaraderie that follows. Back aboard the strike cruiser, the Tech Marines perform post-combat assessment. Armor integrity is checked, minor damage is noted for repair, the assault cannon is cleaned and reloaded. Throughout the process, they speak about Tharion rather than to him, discussing his performance as they would discuss any other piece of equipment. Targeting efficiency was excellent. Power core output remained stable throughout sustained fire. No significant systems degradation. When the assessment is complete, Tech Marine Hadrius delivers his verdict. "Your first combat deployment was highly successful, Ancient Tharion. Your tactical acumen and fire discipline exceeded expectations. Captain Severus has already requested your presence for the assault on the secondary landing zone tomorrow." Tomorrow. Already another battle, another deployment. There will be no time to process what happened, no opportunity to reconcile the disconnection between what Tharion was and what he has become. The crusade continues, the war never ends, and weapons do not get to take time for contemplation or reflection. "I am ready to serve," Tharion responds, because that is what Dreadnoughts say. That is what the chapter expects. And despite everything, despite the horror and the emptiness and the profound alienation, Tharion is still enough of a space marine to give them what they expect. But that night, when the tech marines initiate his stasis cycle and consciousness begins to fade, Tharion has a moment of clarity. He understands now what his existence will be. Battle after battle, deployment after deployment, killing with mechanical efficiency and feeling nothing. The brotherhood that once defined his identity is lost. The simple human satisfactions of physical existence are gone. What remains is duty stripped of all context except the raw mechanical imperative to destroy the enemies of the Imperium. The first deployment has proven that he can function as a dreadnought. But functioning and living are not the same thing, and Tharion is beginning to suspect that the person he was, Brother Sergeant Tharion of 3rd Company, died on the battlefield at the gates of Kandor. What exists now is something else. A weapon with memories. A ghost in a machine. An echo of humanity trapped in a form that grows less human with every passing day. Even in death, I still serve. But this is not service. This is simply existence without purpose beyond the next battle. And the battles will never stop coming. The erosion of self-memory is supposed to be sacred to the Space Marines. The chapter's history is preserved in the librarium, written in blood and etched into stone. Every battle, every fallen brother, every triumph and tragedy is recorded so that future generations might learn from the past. The dead are remembered in the halls of the honored, their names spoken aloud during ceremonies so that they might never truly be forgotten. For warriors who know they will likely die young, this promise of remembrance is a kind of immortality. But memory within a dreadnought becomes something different, something unreliable. Tharion notices it first in small ways. During his 4th week of existence in the sarcophagus, he tries to recall the face of his squad's former apothecary, Brother Helios, who fell during the Castus campaign 15 years ago. The memory should be clear. They fought together for decades, and Helios's death was a loss that affected the entire company. But when Tharion reaches for the image, it comes back blurred and indistinct. He can remember that Helios had a scar across his left cheek, but he cannot picture the exact shape of it. He can recall the sound of the apothecary's voice giving medical assessments, but the actual words are gone. At first, he dismisses it as normal memory degradation. Even enhanced Space Marine minds cannot retain perfect recall of every detail across centuries of service. But then he realizes he cannot remember what he ate during his last meal before the battle at the gates of Kandor. The fact troubles him more than it should. Food was not particularly important to Space Marines. They ate for fuel rather than pleasure. But it was a human act, a small ritual of normalcy between battles. And now, he cannot remember it at all. The Tech Marines tell him this is expected. Your organic brain is adapting to focus on tactically relevant information, Hadrius explains during a routine maintenance session. Sensory memories that no longer serve a purpose will be pruned away. It is an efficient reallocation of neural resources. Efficient. The word makes Tharion want to scream, though his mechanical voice would reduce any scream to a meaningless electronic noise. His memories are not resources to be allocated. They are what makes him who he is. They are proof that he existed as a person rather than just a weapon. But the machine does not care about such distinctions. The machine wants efficiency. By the 6th week, Tharion realizes he cannot remember the sensation of breathing air. He knows intellectually that he once breathed normally, that his lungs once expanded to draw in oxygen from the atmosphere rather than extracting it from amniotic fluid. But when he tries to recall what that felt like, there is only a blank space where the memory should be. The phantom sensation has been replaced entirely by the reality of his current existence. This is how it happens, he understands with growing dread. Not all at once, not in a single catastrophic loss of self, but incrementally, one forgotten detail at a time, one sensory memory erased and replaced by mechanical approximation. The human experiences that once defined him are being slowly overwritten by the reality of existence as a dreadnought. The emotional numbness is perhaps worse than the memory loss. During his 8th week, the chapter receives news that the mining world they recently liberated has been attacked again, this time by a rogue Astartes warband bearing the colors of the Red Corsairs. The entire civilian population was enslaved or slaughtered. The infrastructure Tharion and his brothers fought to protect has been reduced to rubble. Tharion should feel something about this. Anger at the enemy's depredations, sorrow for the wasted lives and efforts, determination to hunt down those responsible. These are the responses that a space marine should have, the emotional connections that prevent warriors from becoming mere killing machines. But when Tharion examines his own reactions, he finds only cold, tactical assessment, the strategic implications, the revised threat estimates, the calculation of resources needed to mount a retaliatory strike. He is analyzing the situation like a computer would, processing data without emotional context, and he realizes with horror that this is what is happening to him. His capacity for genuine emotion is being slowly consumed by the machine logic of the Dreadnought's systems. Every time he interfaces with the tactical displays and targeting computers, every time he processes the endless streams of data that flow through his consciousness, his brain becomes a little more mechanical in its thinking. Chaplain Morteus visits during the 10th week, ostensibly to discuss doctrine and offer spiritual guidance. But Tharion suspects the real purpose is to assess his mental state, to determine if the psychological degradation has progressed to dangerous levels. The chaplain asks careful questions about his faith in the Emperor, his dedication to the chapter, his willingness to continue serving. "Do you ever question your purpose, ancient Tharion?" the chaplain asks, his skull-faced helmet regarding the dreadnought with inscrutable emptiness. "Every warrior questions," Tharion responds carefully. "Doubt is human, but duty transcends doubt." "Indeed," Morteus nods. "But there is a difference between human doubt and the despair that can consume those who dwell too long within the sarcophagus. Tell me truly, brother, do you still feel connected to the Emperor, to your battle brothers, to the ideals that once drove you to service?" It is a trap of a question, and Tharion knows it. If he admits to the disconnection he feels, to the growing sense that he is becoming something other than human, the chaplain might recommend prolonged stasis until his spiritual equilibrium can be restored. But if he lies convincingly enough to hide the erosion of his personality, he risks losing himself entirely to the mechanical coldness that threatens to replace his humanity. "I feel..." Tharion hesitates, searching for words that might convey the complexity of his situation. "I feel as if I am becoming the sum of my tactical knowledge, rather than the person who acquired that knowledge. The battles I remember are clearer than the brothers who fought beside me. The specifications of enemy weapons are more accessible than the faces of the friends I have lost. This troubles me, chaplain, because it suggests I am losing something essential." Morteus is silent for a long moment. When he speaks, there is something in his mechanical vocalization that might be sympathy or might just be practiced formula. "You describe what all dreadnoughts eventually experience, ancient, the transformation from warrior to weapon. Some fight against it, clinging desperately to their humanity until madness takes them. Others embrace it, accepting their new nature and the efficiency it brings. The wise ones find a middle path, retaining enough of themselves to remain effective while acknowledging what has been lost." "And how does one walk that middle path?" Tharion asks, genuinely uncertain. "By choosing what to remember," the chaplain replies. by consciously deciding which memories and emotions are worth preserving and which can be allowed to fade, by understanding that you cannot hold on to everything you were, but neither must you surrender completely to what you have become. It is a balance, and it requires constant vigilance. The advice is better than Tharion expected, though it does nothing to solve the fundamental problem. How does one choose which memories to preserve when the very act of existing in the sarcophagus seems designed to erode them all? How does one maintain emotional connections when every interaction with the outside world is mediated through mechanical sensors and filtered through tactical assessment protocols? The dreams, when they come, are the most disturbing manifestation of his deteriorating sense of self. Dreadnoughts do not sleep in any normal sense, but during stasis cycles, the brain sometimes generates something approximating dreams. These are not the random image collages of normal dreaming, but strange amalgamations of memory and data, human experience filtered through mechanical consciousness. Tharion dreams of battles he never fought, generated from tactical databases and enemy pattern recognition algorithms. He dreams of weapons specifications, described in language that is half High Gothic and half machine code. He dreams of his brothers, but their faces are replaced by targeting reticules and threat assessment markers. The dreams feel wrong, contaminated, as if his subconscious mind is being infected by the very systems he uses while awake. During his 11th week, something breaks. Brother Marcus visits again, now promoted to captain after the previous captain's death in the campaign on Ferrus Quintus. He comes to request tactical advice on an upcoming deployment against a Chaos warband, and he speaks to Tharion with the respect due an ancient and experienced warrior. But as Marcus describes the situation and asks for recommendations, Tharion realizes with sudden clarity that he cannot remember Marcus's first deployment. They served together for a century. Marcus was like a brother to him, perhaps closer than actual blood relatives could ever be. And yet Tharion cannot recall the nervous young Marine who first joined the squad. He can remember tactical deployments they participated in together. He can recount the battles they fought and the enemies they defeated, but he cannot remember the person Marcus was before the weight of command and centuries of war shaped him into what he is now. The realization is devastating. If he has lost his memories of Marcus, what else has been erased? How many other brothers have faded from his recall, reduced to tactical footnotes in a combat database? How much of who he was has already been consumed by the machine? Ancient? Marcus's voice carries a note of concern. Are you well? Tharion wants to explain. He wants to confess that he is losing himself piece by piece, that the person Marcus once knew is being slowly dissolved by the necessities of mechanical existence. But how can he explain such a thing to someone who still possesses a complete and functional body, who still experiences the world through human senses and processes emotions without machine mediation? Forgive me, Captain, Tharion responds instead. A momentary system fluctuation. Please continue with your briefing. And Marcus does, either accepting the explanation or choosing not to press the matter. They discuss tactics and deployment strategies, and Tharion provides the advice expected of him. His tactical knowledge remains intact, perhaps even enhanced by the computational power of the Dreadnought systems. But the human connection that once existed between them feels impossibly distant, separated by more than just the physical barrier of ceramite and adamantium. After Marcus leaves, Tharion spends hours in something that might be meditation, or might simply be despair. He tries to catalogue his memories, to identify what remains of the person he once was. The task proves more disturbing than enlightening. He can remember battles with perfect clarity. He can recall tactical deployments and strategic assessments across 2 centuries of service. He can recite the Codex Astartes from memory and analyze its principles with machine precision. But he struggles to remember simple human moments. The feeling of sunlight on bare skin during training exercises on the chapter's homeworld. The taste of the ceremonial wine consumed after his promotion to sergeant. The sound of his brother's laughter during the rare moments of peace between deployments. These memories, if they still exist at all, are faded and indistinct, like trying to recall events from someone else's life. By the end of his 3rd month, Tharion has accepted a bitter truth. He is still Tharion in name and in tactical knowledge, but the person who bore that name is dying by degrees. What is replacing him is something else, a hybrid consciousness that is neither fully human nor fully machine, but uncomfortably suspended between the two. The Dreadnought is efficient and effective, and exactly what the chapter needs for its wars. But it is not, in any meaningful sense, the same being who once stood as Brother Sergeant of 3rd Company. Even in death, I still serve. But Tharion is beginning to understand that what serves is not the same as what died. The person he was is gone, eroded away by the demands of mechanical existence. What remains is a weapon that remembers being human, growing less human with every passing day, and the year is not even half over. Between battles, the long sleep. The stasis chambers are located deep within the strike cruiser's armored core, in a section of the vessel that most crew members never see. It is called the Sepulchre by the chapter's tech marines, though they speak the word with reverence rather than dread. Here, in temperature-controlled halls lit by the dim glow of status indicators and machinery that has functioned for millennia, the Dreadnoughts wait between deployments. Tharion is placed into stasis for the first time during his 4th month of existence in the sarcophagus. The campaign on Ferrus Quintus has concluded successfully, the Orc threat eliminated and Imperial authority restored. But the chapter's next deployment is projected to take 8 months to reach. A long voyage through the warp to a distant sector where a Tyranid splinter fleet has been detected. The Dreadnought will not be needed during the transit, and maintaining him in an active state would be an unnecessary drain on resources. The shutdown process begins with warning tones transmitted directly into his consciousness through the neural interface. Tharion feels his awareness beginning to narrow, systems gradually reducing their activity in a sequence designed to prevent shock or damage. His sensory feeds dim one by one. The tactical displays fade to darkness. The constant stream of diagnostic data slows to a trickle and then stops entirely. Tech Marine Hadrius's voice is the last thing Tharion hears before consciousness fades. The Emperor protects, Ancient. Sleep well, and know that you will be awakened when the chapter has need of you once more. Then there is nothing. The experience of stasis is profound in its emptiness. It is not sleep, not in any sense that a human being would understand the word. There are no dreams, no passage of time, no sense of self persisting through the darkness. It is simply cessation. One moment, Tharion exists, aware and conscious. The next moment, without any transition or gradual descent, he does not. When he is awakened, 8 months have passed. 8 months of time that Tharion has no memory of experiencing. The universe aged without him. Events occurred. Battles were fought. His battle brothers lived and possibly died. And he was simply absent, existing in a state of suspended animation that is as close to non-existence as a living being can experience while remaining technically alive. The reactivation process is jarring and disorienting. Systems come online in sequence, sensory feeds reconnecting one after another. Tharion's consciousness reassembles itself from wherever it had gone during stasis, and for several long moments, he has no idea where or when he is. The last memory he has is of Hadrius's voice speaking words of blessing, and now suddenly he is awake again, and everything has changed. The Sepulchre is the same, but the crew members performing the reactivation sequence are different faces he does not recognize. The strike cruiser's hull resonates with the familiar vibrations of real space travel, rather than the disturbing wrongness of warp transit, which suggests they have already emerged from the Imperium. And the tactical briefing that loads into his consciousness speaks of a threat that is already being engaged, battles that have commenced while he slept. Ancient Tharion, a voice he does not recognize, addresses him. I am Tech Marine Kaelon. Tech Marine Hadrius was killed during boarding actions against an Elder raider craft 4 months ago. I have assumed responsibility for your maintenance and tactical deployment. 4 months ago. The words barely register before their full import strikes him. Hadrius, who guided him through the early days of his transformation, who answered his questions with patience and explained the technical aspects of his new existence, is dead. Killed while Tharion slept, unaware and unable to assist. And the chapter simply assigned a new tech marine to manage the Dreadnought, because weapons do not mourn and machinery does not grieve. I understand, Tharion responds, though understanding does nothing to diminish the sense of profound dislocation. 8 months. The number feels meaningless. It could have been 8 days or 8 years for all the subjective experience he has of it. Time has become an abstraction, something that happens to other people while he exists outside its normal flow. The deployment this time is against Tyranids on an agri-world designated as Harvest Station Secundus. The briefing explains that the civilian population has already been evacuated, that the world is being contested purely for strategic reasons related to supply lines and sector control. Tharion processes this information automatically, his enhanced mind cataloguing the tactical implications and potential deployments. But there is a strange disconnection to it all, as if he is reading about events that do not quite concern him. The battle itself passes in what feels like moments. Tharion is deployed alongside a Terminator squad to spearhead an assault on a Tyranid digestion pool where the alien organisms are processing biomass. His assault cannon tears through hormigants and termagants with mechanical efficiency. His power fist crushes a warrior organism into pulp. The Terminators fight beside him, their stormbolters speaking in rhythmic thunder, and together they clear the objective in under 20 minutes. And then he is back in the Thunderhawk, being transported to the strike cruiser, and the battle is already becoming a tactical report rather than a lived experience. Tharion tries to hold on to some sense of what happened, to preserve the memory of combat and the brothers who fought beside him, but it is like trying to hold water in his hands. The details slip away, reduced to data points and casualty assessments. Back in the Sepulchre, Tech Marine Kalon performs the standard post-combat maintenance and then delivers the news that Tharion will be returned to stasis. The campaign on Harvest Station Secundus is expected to last another 3 months, but the Dreadnought services are not required for the remainder of the operation. Resources must be conserved. Other assets can handle the remaining objectives. 3 months, Tharion repeats, and something in his mechanical voice must convey his reluctance because Kalon pauses. Is there a problem, Ancient? How can Tharion explain the growing horror of non-existence, the fear that each stasis cycle takes him further from any sense of continuous identity? How can he articulate the suspicion that he is being erased in pieces, that the person he was is being slowly overwritten by long stretches of time that he will never experience? No problem, Tech Marine. I am ready to serve when needed. The stasis takes him again, and again he ceases to exist for a period that is meaningless to him, but significant to the universe outside his sarcophagus. When he awakens the next time, 5 months have passed, then 7 months, then 3, then 11. Each awakening is for deployment, brief periods of violent combat, followed by return to the darkness of non-existence. It is during one of these rare waking periods between stasis cycles that Tharion encounters another of the chapter's dreadnoughts, Ancient Malachi, who has served in that capacity for over 3 centuries. They are both being maintained in the Sepulchre simultaneously, a rare occurrence that allows for direct communication between the massive war machines. You are troubled, young one. Malachi's voice crackles across the Vox network that connects the dreadnoughts. The term young one would be absurd applied to any other space marine with 2 centuries of service, but from the perspective of someone who has existed in this form for 300 years, Tharion supposes it is accurate. I am losing track of time, Tharion admits. Each stasis cycle feels like non-existence. I wake and months or years have passed, and I have no sense of their passage. It feels like I am being erased a piece at a time. You are, Malachi responds with disturbing frankness. The person you were is incompatible with existence as a dreadnought. Either you adapt to this new form, or you go mad, fighting against what cannot be changed. I chose adaptation 300 years ago. I barely remember what it felt like to possess a body of flesh. The admission should be horrifying, but Malachi delivers it with the matter-of-fact acceptance of someone describing an obvious truth. And Tharion realizes with growing dread that this is his future. Centuries of stasis interrupted by brief, violent deployments. The slow erosion of everything that once made him human. The gradual transformation from warrior to weapon, from person to tool. How do you maintain any sense of self? Tharion asks desperately. How do you avoid becoming nothing more than a combat platform with a consciousness attached? I don't, Malachi says simply. I am a combat platform with a consciousness attached, but I serve the Emperor and the chapter with efficiency that flesh could never achieve. I have fought in battles that will be remembered for millennia. I have knowledge and experience that makes me valuable beyond measure. If the cost is the loss of my humanity, then so be it. The Imperium needs weapons, not philosophers. The conversation ends shortly after, as Tech Marine Kalon begins the shutdown sequence for Malachi's stasis. But the ancient dreadnaught's words echo in Tharion's mind long after. Is that what he will become? A thing that has accepted the loss of its humanity as the necessary price of continued service? A consciousness that has surrendered everything except the ability to kill efficiently? The stasis cycles continue. Wake, deploy, fight, return, sleep. Each iteration makes the previous one harder to remember. Tharion begins to lose track of which battles he has fought and which are simply tactical scenarios he has reviewed. The faces of his battle brothers blur together. Names become difficult to recall. Only the constant, the act of killing the Emperor's enemies, remains clear and unchanging. By the time his first year in the sarcophagus draws to a close, Tharion has spent more time in stasis than in active consciousness. The subjective experience of his existence is a series of disconnected moments strung together by long periods of nothingness. He has no continuous narrative of his own life anymore. No sense of time flowing naturally from one moment to the next. Just fragments of awareness separated by voids that could be hours or years, for all the difference it makes to his perception. The long sleep, some call it. The waiting between wars. But it is not sleep in any restorative sense. It is erasure. It is the slow deletion of self through the removal of time and experience and continuity. And there is no escape from it, because this is what dreadnoughts are for. To wait in darkness until they are needed, and then to fight with terrible efficiency, and then to return to darkness once more. Even in death, I still serve. But the death is happening slowly, one stasis cycle at a time. And what will remain when the person called Tharion has been completely overwritten by the thing that remembers being him? The changed brotherhood. The reclusium is full for the memorial service. Every space marine of the Third Company gathered to honor their fallen brothers. Captain Severus stands at the front, reading names from a scroll that seems too long for the month's worth of combat it represents. Tharion stands at the back of the chamber, his massive frame barely fitting through the doorway designed for warriors in power armor. 7 months have passed since his interment. 7 months of deployments and stasis and the gradual alienation from everything he once knew. And now he listens as Severus reads the names of the dead, recognizing some and failing to recognize others. The disconnect is jarring. These should be his brothers, warriors he fought alongside for decades. But between the memory erosion and the long stretches of stasis, Tharion finds himself struggling to connect names to faces, to memories. When the ceremony concludes, the Marines begin to disperse. Some approach Tharion, offering words of respect and acknowledgement. but there is a distance in their interactions that was not present before his transformation. They treat him with the reverence due to an ancient relic, but not with the easy familiarity of brotherhood. Brother Corvus, now a squad sergeant himself, pauses near the Dreadnought. Ancient Tharian, your tactical advice during the Hive Secundus deployment was instrumental in our success. The entire squad owes you a debt of gratitude. The words are kind, but they highlight the changed relationship. Corvus once treated Tharian as an equal, a battle brother who had earned respect through shared struggle. Now he speaks with the formal deference one might use when addressing a superior officer or a venerated hero. The friendship that once existed between them has been replaced by hierarchical respect. Your squad performed admirably, Tharian responds, the mechanical voice making genuine warmth impossible to convey. Continue to serve the Emperor with such distinction, and you will bring honor to the chapter. It is the kind of thing an ancient is supposed to say, words that sound wise and measured. But Tharian wants to say something else entirely. He wants to ask Corvus if he remembers the time they held the line together on Castus. Just the two of them, against an entire orc mob, certain they would die, but determined to make the greenskins pay for every meter. He wants to remind Corvus of the night they spent maintaining their armor together, discussing their doubts and fears in the way that only true brothers can. But those moments belong to a different person, to Brother Sergeant Tharian, who is effectively dead. Ancient Tharian exists outside such personal connections. He is a font of tactical wisdom and a devastating weapon, but he is not someone's friend or brother in any meaningful sense. The isolation becomes more pronounced over the following months. When Tharian is awake and active, he finds himself increasingly excluded from the informal aspects of chapter life. The Battle Brothers still seek his tactical advice before major deployments. The chaplains still value his perspectives on doctrine and strategy, but he is not invited to the training sessions where younger Marines spar and test themselves. He does not participate in the rituals of armor maintenance and weapon consecration that bind squads together. He exists in a separate space, honored but apart. Part of this is simple practicality. Tharian's massive form cannot fit into most of the chapter's facilities designed for power-armored Marines. The training halls are too small, the briefing chambers have insufficient clearance. Even the chapel spaces become crowded when a Dreadnought is present. His very size makes him a physical barrier to normal chapter operations. But there is more to it than logistics. The other Marines struggle to relate to Tharian because he has become something fundamentally different from them. They possess bodies that can feel pain and pleasure, that require rest and sustenance, that exist in continuous relationship with the physical world. Tharian exists in a metal tomb, his remaining flesh rotting away in amniotic fluid, his consciousness mediated through mechanical systems. They are still recognizably human despite their genetic enhancements. He is something else entirely. The realization crystallizes during a conversation with Brother Chaplain Voss, who has been assigned to monitor Tharian's spiritual health. They meet in one of the few spaces large enough to accommodate the Dreadnought, a chamber normally used for storing heavy equipment. "You seem troubled, Ancient," Voss observes, his skull-faced helmet regarding Tharian with the empty gaze that all chaplains affect. "Speak plainly. Your spiritual well-being is my responsibility." Tharian considers how to articulate the complexity of his isolation. "I find myself increasingly distant from my battle brothers, Chaplain. They treat me with respect but not with kinship. I am honored but not included, consulted but not trusted with fellowship." "You are surprised by this?" Voss asks, and there is genuine curiosity in his tone. "You are no longer what they are, Ancient. You have transcended the limitations of flesh and been reborn as something greater. It is natural that there should be distance between what you have become and what they remain." "Greater?" The word emerges with more bitterness than Tharian intends. "I have lost everything that made me a brother to them. My body, my senses, my ability to share in the simple rituals that bind warriors together. In what way is this greater?" Voss is silent for a long moment, and when he speaks, his words carry unexpected weight. You speak a dangerous truth, ancient Tharian. The chapter venerates dreadnoughts as paragons of service, warriors so dedicated that they continue to fight even after death. But this veneration creates a distance that can be more isolating than any physical barrier. Your brothers cannot see you as an equal because the chapter has taught them to see you as something more, and in being elevated above them, you have been separated from them. It is the most honest assessment Tharian has heard from anyone in the chapter hierarchy. The admission that the very honor bestowed upon dreadnoughts creates the conditions for their isolation. That the reverence they receive is also a wall that prevents genuine connection. Then, how do I bridge that distance? Tharian asks. How do I maintain any sense of brotherhood when I am fundamentally different from those I once called brothers? Some don't, Voss admits. They accept the isolation as the price of continued service. They focus on tactical excellence and let the personal connections fade. Others go mad from the loneliness, their minds fragmenting under the weight of eternal separation. And a very few find ways to maintain threads of connection, small gestures and shared experiences that remind them and their brothers that humanity persists beneath the machine. The conversation offers no easy solutions, but it does provide clarity. Tharian's isolation is not accidental or incidental. It is built into the very nature of what he has become. The chapter needs its dreadnoughts to be revered ancients, repositories of wisdom and devastating weapons. But this need creates the very distance that makes genuine brotherhood impossible. In the months that follow, Tharian tries to find those small gestures that Voss mentioned. He makes efforts to remember details about individual Marines, to ask questions that show he still cares about their personal experiences rather than just their tactical capabilities. When he provides advice, he tries to frame it in ways that acknowledge their autonomy, rather than simply dictating what should be done. Sometimes it works. Brother Demetrius, a relatively new member of Third Company, seems genuinely appreciative when Tharian asks about his progress in mastering the chapter's close combat doctrines. Sister Apothecary Miriam treats the dreadnought with professional courtesy rather than distant reverence, discussing tactical deployments as collaborative planning sessions rather than pronouncements from on high. But these small successes are undermined by the simple reality of time dilation through stasis cycles. Tharian will form a connection with a Marine, have several meaningful interactions, and then be placed into stasis for months. When he awakens, that Marine may have been promoted to a different company, or transferred to another deployment, or killed in combat. The continuity of relationship that defines friendship simply cannot survive the fragmentary nature of his existence. The most painful reminder of his changed status comes during his 9th month, when the chapter celebrates the anniversary of a great victory from a century past. It is a solemn occasion marked by ritual combat demonstrations and the recitation of honored names. Tharian participated in that ancient battle, fought alongside legends who are now entries in the librarium's records of the fallen. He expects to be invited to share his memories of the event, to provide first-hand testimony of what happened. And he is invited, but not in the way he anticipated. He is brought before an assembly of the chapter's leadership and asked to give testimony as a historical source, his words recorded by the librarium for future reference. The chaplains treat him like a living archive, rather than a person who lived through the events he describes. When Tharian speaks of the battle, recounting the deployments and tactical decisions and heroic last stands, the assembled Marines listen with rapt attention. But they are not listening to a brother share his memories. They are listening to history made flesh, to a source of information about events that seem impossibly distant, despite being only 100 years past. After the ceremony, Chapter Master Calum approaches the dreadnought with what might be gratitude or might simply be political courtesy. Your testimony was invaluable, ancient Tharian. The chapter is fortunate to have your wisdom preserved in this manner. Future generations will learn from your experiences. Future generations. The phrase highlights everything that is wrong with Tharion's new existence. He is no longer part of the present, no longer a participant in the ongoing life of the chapter. He is becoming history, a relic from the past that happens to still function in the present. His value is in what he was rather than what he is. The realization solidifies during his 11th month, when he is awakened from stasis to find that Third Company has been restructured. Its surviving members distributed among other companies to replace casualties. The squad that Tharion once led no longer exists. The brothers he trained and fought beside have been scattered throughout the chapter, assigned to new units with new leaders and new tactical roles. When Tharion asks about this reorganization, Tech Marine Kalon explains it with the detached professionalism of someone reciting routine administrative changes. Third Company took heavy casualties during the siege of Hive Primus while you were in stasis. The survivors were distributed to maintain optimal combat effectiveness throughout the chapter. You will now be assigned to Fourth Company for tactical operations. Fourth Company, a unit Tharion has minimal history with, led by warriors he barely knows, fighting alongside brothers he has no established relationship with. His entire context within the chapter has been erased while he slept, reorganized for efficiency, without consultation or even notification. I understand, Tharion responds, because what else can he say? That the chapter should have consulted him before destroying the last remnants of his old identity? That administrative efficiency should be secondary to maintaining some continuity of service? The argument is absurd on its face. The chapter's needs supersede individual preference. Dreadnoughts serve where they are assigned. But the final severance of connection to Third Company feels like a kind of death. Those were his brothers, his squad, his identity for 2 centuries. And now they are scattered, reassigned, their unity broken by the practical necessities of war. Tharion was not even awake to witness the dissolution, not present for the memorial services, or the final gathering, or whatever closure might have been offered. He is simply told that his old life no longer exists, and that he should adapt to this new reality with the same efficiency expected of any weapon being redeployed to a different battlefield. By the end of his first year, Tharion has accepted a bitter truth. The brotherhood that once defined his existence is gone. Oh, he is still treated with respect and even reverence by his battle brothers. His tactical advice is still sought and valued. His presence in combat is still appreciated and feared by the enemy. But the personal connections, the friendships and bonds that made him more than just a soldier, have been severed as thoroughly as his limbs were amputated during the interment surgery. He is Ancient Tharion now, no longer Brother Sergeant Tharion. And ancients exist outside the normal flow of chapter life, preserved but apart, honored but isolated. They are weapons that remember being brothers, and that memory grows more distant with every passing month. Even in death, I still serve. But service without brotherhood is just mechanism, function without connection. And Tharion is slowly discovering that a weapon can be effective without being alive in any way that matters. The technical prison. The maintenance schedule is absolute and inviolable. Every 72 hours of active operation, whether in combat or simply remaining conscious in the sepulchre, Tharion must undergo mandatory systems assessment and servicing. The Tech Marines treat these sessions with religious devotion, their prayers to the Omnissiah blending seamlessly with diagnostic procedures and mechanical adjustments. Tharion has come to dread these rituals, though he would never speak such blasphemy aloud. During his 8th month, Tech Marine Kalon discovers a minor misalignment in one of the neural interface cables connecting Tharion's spinal column to the Dreadnought's targeting systems. The correction requires direct manipulation of the connection, which means Kalon must open a service panel in the sarcophagus while Tharion remains conscious. There is no anesthetic for this procedure, The pilot must be awake to confirm that the adjustments do not disrupt his ability to control. The weapon systems. The sensation of the Tech Marine's tools working on his exposed nervous system is beyond description. It is not pain in any conventional sense, though pain is certainly part of it. It is violation, the feeling of foreign objects touching parts of himself that should be forever internal and protected. Tharian's consciousness fractures under the sensation, his awareness splitting between the mechanical body and the organic remnant trapped at its core. Neural connectivity optimal, Kalen announces, his voice filtered through Tharian's audio sensors while simultaneously being heard through the speakers in the sarcophagus chamber. The doubling effect is disorienting, making it difficult to maintain a coherent sense of where Kalon actually is relative to Tharian's position. Acknowledged, Tharian responds through gritted teeth that no longer exist in any functional sense. The mechanical vocalization betrays none of the distress he feels. The Tech Marines treat the Dreadnought's mechanical components with reverence, bordering on worship. Each weapon system is blessed with sacred oils before and after use. The armor plates are inscribed with prayers of protection. The power core is surrounded by devotional scrolls and purity seals. But the organic component, the pilot, receives clinical attention at best. Tharian is not a person to be cared for, but a biological interface unit to be maintained. During his 9th month, a routine inspection reveals that the amniotic fluid in his sarcophagus has begun to develop bacterial contamination despite the filtration systems. The solution is to drain the chamber and replace the fluid entirely, while Tharian remains conscious and aware. The process takes 4 hours. For 4 hours, Tharian exists with no fluid in his lungs, his remaining organic tissue exposed to air that feels like ice and fire simultaneously. The automated breathing apparatus forces oxygen directly into his lung through a tube, a mechanical ventilation that makes him feel like he is being drowned in reverse. His skin, thinned and pale from months of suspension, dries and cracks. The remnant muscles that serve no purpose except to exist spasm involuntarily, causing pain that has no outlet and serves no warning function. Through it all, the Tech Marines work with methodical precision, testing systems and confirming readings, completely indifferent to the organic suffering occurring at the center of their machine. They are not cruel. They simply do not register Tharian's distress as something worthy of consideration. The organic component is experiencing discomfort, but the machine's function is not impaired. That is all that matters. The new amniotic fluid tastes different from the old, slightly more alkaline, with a chemical tang that makes Tharian want to gag, despite no longer possessing a functioning gag reflex. The Tech Marines assure him he will adapt to the new formulation within days. They do not ask if he wants to adapt. The question is not relevant. The fluid will keep him alive. His preferences are not part of the equation. The weapon system's maintenance is even more invasive in its own way. The assault cannon must be disassembled and cleaned after every deployment, its components inspected for wear and damage. This is normal maintenance, the kind of care any weapon receives. But the assault cannon is part of Tharian now, connected to his nervous system in ways that make it feel like an extension of his own body. When the Tech Marines remove it for servicing, the sensation is akin to amputation. Something that should be there simply isn't, and his brain continues sending control signals to an appendage that no longer exists. The Power Fist requires calibration to ensure that Tharian's neural commands translate accurately into mechanical action. This process involves Tharian attempting to manipulate objects of varying size and fragility, while the Tech Marines adjust sensitivity settings and force multipliers. The session during his 10th month includes an incident where a miscalibration causes the Power Fist to crush a test object when Tharian intended only to grip it gently. The Tech Marines note the error and adjust the settings without comment. But Tharian is left with the disturbing awareness that his sense of his own strength is entirely dependent on software configurations and calibration routines. If the Tech Marines make a mistake, or if a system degrades between maintenance cycles, he could accidentally crush objects or people he intended to handle carefully. His agency over his own actions has been reduced to the accuracy of the machines that mediate his will. The sacred machine spirits that supposedly inhabit the Dreadnought systems are another source of ongoing tension. The Tech Marines speak of these entities with reverence, treating them as allies and partners in maintaining the war machine's function. They perform rituals of appeasement and thanksgiving, burning incense and reciting liturgies designed to keep the machine spirits content and cooperative. Tharion is less certain what these spirits actually are. Sometimes they feel like simple automated systems, programmed responses and diagnostic routines that activate according to predetermined parameters. Other times, they seem more conscious, almost anticipatory in their reactions to his commands. And occasionally, usually during combat, they seem to have their own agenda, suggesting targeting priorities or tactical adjustments that Tharion did not consciously consider. During his 11th month, Tharion experiences what the Tech Marines call a machine spirit communion, though the event feels more like a hostile takeover. In the middle of a combat deployment against a chaos cult, his targeting systems suddenly lock onto a priority target that Tharion had not designated. The assault cannon fires without his conscious command, the burst of shells tearing through a cultist sorcerer who was preparing some kind of ritual. The kill is tactically sound. The sorcerer was a legitimate threat who needed to be neutralized. But Tharion did not make the decision to fire. The machine spirits, or whatever they truly are, acted independently to eliminate a threat their sensors detected. And Tharion is left with the disturbing realization that he is not entirely in control of his own actions. The Dreadnought can and will act according to its own logic, overriding his intentions when it deems necessary. When he raises this concern with Tech Marine Kalon, the response is dismissive. The machine spirits protect you and enhance your combat effectiveness. You should be grateful for their intervention. The sorcerer might have completed his ritual if not for their vigilance. But gratitude is difficult when agency is compromised. Tharion understands intellectually that the machine spirit's autonomous actions serve a tactical purpose, that their faster reaction times and pattern recognition capabilities can compensate for human hesitation. But understanding does not make the experience less disturbing. Every time the Dreadnought acts without his explicit command, Tharion feels a little less like a pilot and a little more like a passenger in his own body. The power core presents its own set of problems. It is a miniature plasma reactor, generating the immense energy needed to operate the Dreadnought systems. The shielding is supposed to protect the organic pilot from radiation exposure, but during his 10th month, Tharion begins experiencing strange sensations that the Tech Marines eventually diagnose as minor radiation poisoning affecting his nervous system. The solution is to increase the shielding, which requires partially disassembling the sarcophagus interior and adding additional protection around the power core housing. The procedure takes 6 hours and requires Tharion to remain conscious throughout, while his senses are bombarded with electromagnetic interference, and his remaining flesh is exposed to levels of radiation that would kill an unaugmented human in minutes. The enhanced shielding helps, but it does not eliminate the problem entirely. Tharion still experiences periodic neurological symptoms, phantom sensations that have no physical source, momentary lapses in sensory processing, occasional involuntary muscle spasms in the remnant of his organic body. The Tech Marines assure him these are minor side effects, well within acceptable parameters for a Dreadnought pilot. They do not seem to consider that acceptable parameters might feel very different to the consciousness experiencing them. Perhaps the most dehumanizing aspect of the technical maintenance is the way it reduces Tharion to components and systems. During maintenance sessions, the Tech Marines do not speak to him as a person or even as a fellow servant of the Emperor. They discuss him as they would discuss any complex machinery, analyzing performance metrics and identifying potential points of failure. The biological interface unit shows signs of tissue degradation in the upper thoracic region, Kalon notes during one inspection. Recommend increased nutrient supplementation to slow the process. The biological interface unit. That is what Tharion has become in the technical lexicon. Not a space marine, not even a pilot. Just the biological component that provides consciousness to an otherwise automated weapon system. His humanity has been reduced to a technical specification. The maintenance logs are particularly disturbing when Tharion accesses them through his tactical interface. Each session is recorded in exhaustive detail, but the language is purely mechanical. Servo response times, hydraulic pressure consistency, neural interface latency, ammunition feed mechanism integrity. The organic pilot is mentioned only when absolutely necessary, and always in terms of function rather than experience. Pilot reported discomfort during neural recalibration. Discomfort did not affect system performance. No corrective action required. That single line represents 4 hours of sensation that Tharion can only describe as having his brain slowly twisted while remaining fully conscious. But to the tech marines, it is a minor notation, a data point that indicates the pilot's organic substrate is functioning within expected parameters. By the end of his first year, Tharion has been opened, adjusted, recalibrated, and serviced more times than he can count. Each procedure is necessary. Each adjustment improves his combat effectiveness or prevents system degradation. Each ritual of maintenance honors the machine's spirits and ensures the Dreadnought's continued function. But necessity does not make the experience less horrific. Tharion exists at the mercy of the tech marines, unable to refuse their interventions, unable to protest the invasions of his remaining flesh, unable to demand consideration for his organic suffering. He is property of the chapter, a weapon to be maintained and deployed as needed. Even in death, I still serve. But the serving requires being periodically disassembled and reassembled, subjected to procedures that would constitute torture if applied to a conscious being outside the context of sacred maintenance. And Tharion is beginning to understand that this will never end. As long as he continues to function, the maintenance will continue. The invasions, the adjustments, the reduction of his existence to technical specifications and performance metrics. He is a weapon that happens to be conscious, and weapons do not get to decide how they are maintained. Variations in damnation. Not all dreadnoughts are created equal, and not all chapters treat their ancient warriors the same way. This becomes clear to Tharion during his 10th month when the strike cruiser participates in a joint operation with elements of the Blood Angels chapter. Among the crimson-armored warriors who board for tactical coordination is one of their Furioso pattern dreadnoughts, a specialist variant unique to the Sons of Sanguinius. Tharion encounters the Blood Angels dreadnought in a corridor outside the Strategium. The red-armored war machine is smaller than his own Castroferrum chassis, but somehow more intense, its movements containing an aggression that borders on barely contained fury. When it speaks, its mechanical voice carries undertones that Tharion's own carefully modulated vocalizations lack, a hint of madness perhaps, or grief that has curdled into rage. "Brother," the Blood Angels warrior acknowledges, using the Vox channel rather than external speakers. "I am Furioso Ancient Dante. The Sons of Sanguinius stand with you." "Ancient Tharion," he responds. "The honor is ours." They speak briefly about the upcoming deployment, sharing tactical assessments and coordinating fire support protocols. But Tharion cannot help noticing the differences in how this dreadnought operates. Where Tharion's movements are calculated and precise, Dante's are aggressive and impulsive. Where Tharion's combat doctrine emphasizes optimal positioning and efficient target elimination, Dante seems to favor overwhelming assault and brutal close combat. "You fight with great passion," Tharion observes carefully. "Passion?" Dante's mechanical laughter is bitter. "I fight with rage, brother. The black rage that claims all Sons of Sanguinius eventually. They interred me in this chassis not to preserve my tactical knowledge, but to contain the madness that threatened to consume me entirely. I am a weapon pointed at the enemy and unleashed, because if I am not fighting, I am screaming." The admission is startling in its honesty. Tharion has been taught to view Dreadnought interment as honor, as preservation of valuable experience. But for Dante, it is clearly a form of containment. He has been sealed in adamantium not to save him, but to weaponize his affliction, to turn the genetic curse of the Blood Angels into a tool for the chapter's use. Does it help? Tharion asks quietly. The combat, the killing, does it quiet the rage? Nothing quiets it, Dante says. The rage is eternal, but at least in battle, I can direct it toward the Emperor's enemies, rather than letting it consume me from within. This is not service, brother. This is penance. And it will only end when some enemy finally lands the killing blow that my handlers pray for, but dare not deliver themselves. The conversation haunts Tharion long after the Blood Angels depart. He has been thinking of his own condition as a slow erosion of humanity, a gradual transformation from warrior to weapon. But Dante's experience suggests that some dreadnoughts are conscious prisons from the very beginning, their interment motivated not by honor, but by necessity. This realization is reinforced during his 11th month, when the chapter encounters a Space Wolves force during a campaign in the Eastern Fringe. The Sons of Russ bring with them a legend that has served since before the Horus Heresy, a warrior so ancient that his memories span 10,000 years, whose wisdom is sought by the entire chapter in times of great need. Tharion is granted a brief audience with this venerable ancient, a meeting arranged more for diplomatic purposes than any practical need. The Space Wolves dreadnought is massive even by the standards of such war machines, his chassis covered in wolf pelts and totems, his armor marked with honors from campaigns whose names are now legend. Young one, the ancient rumbles, his voice like grinding stone. You carry the weight of your transformation heavily. I remember when it felt new to me as well. 10,000 years, Tharion says, the number almost incomprehensible. How do you maintain any sense of self across such a span? I don't, the ancient replies simply. The person I was died 10,000 years ago. What remains is something else, a repository of memory, a weapon with consciousness, a thing that remembers being human but can no longer claim to be human in any meaningful sense. I have forgotten more lives than you have lived. I have outlasted brothers, chapters, entire civilizations, and with each passing century, I become more machine and less man. Then why continue? The question emerges before Tharion can consider whether it is appropriate. Because I must. The ancient's words carry the weight of ages. Because the Imperium needs what I have become, even if what I have become is a monster wearing the face of a hero. Because stopping would mean acknowledging that everything I have sacrificed was for nothing. So I continue, year after year, century after century, killing the Emperor's enemies, and pretending that this is still service rather than simply the mechanical continuation of a process that should have ended long ago. The conversation leaves Tharion shaken. If 10,000 years of existence as a dreadnought leads to such profound alienation, what hope does he have of maintaining his humanity across even a fraction of that span? But not all variations in dreadnought existence are so bleak. During a resupply stop at a forge world, Tharion encounters a tech marine who has been voluntarily interred in a dreadnought chassis. The choice was not made out of necessity. The tech marine was not mortally wounded. Rather, he chose interment as a way to more fully commune with the machine spirits and serve the Omnissiah in a form that blurred the line between flesh and technology. You chose this? Tharion asks, genuinely struggling to comprehend the decision. I did, the tech marine dreadnought responds. My flesh was a limitation, a barrier between my consciousness and the pure logic of the machine. In this form, I am closer to the Omnissiah's vision. I can interface directly with systems that flesh could never comprehend. I am no longer bound by the weaknesses of biology. The tech marine speaks with genuine enthusiasm, clearly viewing his transformation as an ascension rather than a curse. But Tharion notices details that suggest the reality may be more complex. The Techmarine's movements are precise to the point of being rigid, lacking any organic fluidity. His vocal patterns follow mathematical rhythms, as if he is speaking in programmed sequences rather than natural language. And when asked about his memories of life before interment, he dismisses them as legacy data of diminishing relevance. Perhaps most disturbing are the Redemptors, the new pattern of Dreadnought that has been introduced with the Primaris Marines. Tharion encounters one during a joint deployment, and the differences from his own Castroferum chassis are immediately apparent. The Redemptor is larger, more powerful, bristling with advanced weapon systems and sophisticated targeting arrays. But the pilot's condition is clearly far worse than Tharion's own. The neural load of controlling the advanced systems is burning out the Redemptor's pilot at an accelerated rate. The tech marine accompanying the Redemptor mentions casually that most pilots survive only a few decades of service before their organic components are reduced to non-viable biomass and must be replaced. A few decades, Tharion repeats, horrified. The Castroferum chassis can sustain a pilot for millennia. The Redemptor was not designed for longevity, the tech marine explains. It was designed for maximum combat effectiveness. The accelerated degradation of the pilot is considered an acceptable trade-off for the increased firepower and tactical capability. Acceptable to whom, Tharion wonders, but does not ask aloud. Certainly not acceptable to the pilots who are being burned out like ammunition, their consciousness consumed by the very weapons they control. The Redemptor represents a new philosophy of Dreadnought deployment. The pilot is no longer a valuable resource to be preserved, but a consumable component to be used and replaced as needed. Each variation reinforces the same fundamental truth. There is no universal experience of being a Dreadnought. Some, like Dante, are contained madmen whose rage is weaponized. Others, like the 10,000-year-old Ancient, are living fossils who have lost all meaningful connection to humanity. Still others, like the voluntary tech marine, embrace their transformation as transcendence, and the Redemptors are quite literally being burned alive by the power of their own chassis. But despite the variations, certain commonalities emerge. All Dreadnoughts exist outside normal brotherhood. All experience the slow erosion of their humanity through the necessities of mechanical existence. All are venerated but isolated, honored but fundamentally other, and all face the prospect of existence measured in centuries or millennia, a span of time that the human mind was never meant to comprehend. By the end of his first year, Tharion understands that his experience is both unique and universal. The specific details of his suffering differ from other Dreadnoughts, shaped by chapter tradition and chassis configuration and individual psychology. But the underlying reality is the same for all of them. They are warriors who died but were not allowed to rest. They are consciousness trapped in machines, human awareness forced to operate through inhuman systems. Even in death, I still serve. But the death comes in many forms, and the service extracts many different prices. And knowing that others have walked this path before him, that some have endured for millennia, while others burn out in decades, offers no comfort. Because regardless of the variation, the fundamental condition remains the same. They are weapons that remember being human, and that remembering becomes more painful with every passing year. The years end. 12 months have passed since Brother Sergeant Tharion of 3rd Company was interred within the adamantium coffin that has become his eternal prison. 12 months measured by the chapter's chronometers, though Tharion's subjective experience of that time is fractured and discontinuous, broken into fragments of consciousness, separated by long voids of stasis sleep. If he attempts to catalogue his active hours, the time spent actually conscious and aware, rather than suspended in the void of stasis, he estimates perhaps 4 months of true waking existence, 4 months out of 12. 2/3 of his first year as a Dreadnought spent in a state of non-being, erased from the flow of time, while the universe continued without him. The chapter has deployed him to 17 different combat operations during those 4 conscious months. 17 battles across a dozen different worlds, against enemies ranging from orc warbands to tyrannid bioforms to the twisted servants of chaos. His combat record is exemplary. His tactical contributions have been noted by multiple captains and commended by the chapter master himself. By every objective measure, the interment has been a success. Ancient Tharion is an asset to the chapter, a weapon of terrible efficiency, a repository of tactical knowledge that continues to serve the Emperor's will. But success measured in strategic value tells nothing of the cost measured in humanity lost. Tharion attempts to remember who he was 12 months ago, before the catastrophic injury at the gates of Kandor, before the surgery that transformed him from warrior to weapon. The memories are there, technically accessible through the cognitive pathways that remain intact, but they feel distant and unreal, like reading someone else's service record rather than recalling lived experience. He can remember that he enjoyed the camaraderie of Third Company, but he cannot recall what that enjoyment felt like. He can remember standing watch with his brothers during long deployments, but the specific conversations and shared moments have faded into generic impressions. He can remember his promotion to Brother Sergeant and the pride that came with increased responsibility, but the emotion itself is gone, replaced by abstract knowledge that he once felt such things. Most disturbing is the realization that he no longer misses what he has lost. The absence of his body should be a source of constant grief, a wound that never heals. But it has become normal. The amniotic fluid in his lungs, the neural cables piercing his spine, the complete dependency on machines for every basic function. These horrors have become his baseline existence. He has adapted, as humans always adapt, and the adaptation itself represents a kind of death. The faces of his battle brothers have become difficult to distinguish. Oh, he can identify them through his optical sensors, match their features to names in his tactical database, recall their combat specializations and deployment histories. But he struggles to see them as individuals rather than tactical assets. Brother Corvus is a capable close combat specialist. Brother Valen demonstrates above-average performance with heavy weapons. Sister Apothecary Miriam maintains excellent medical response times. These are the terms in which Tharion now thinks about the warriors he once considered family. And the fact that this has become his default mode of perception suggests that the transformation from human to machine is progressing exactly as the ancient Dreadnought warned it would. On the anniversary of his interment, a date that the Tech Marines track with precision, even if Tharion has lost any meaningful sense of its passage, Chaplain Voss visits for what he calls a spiritual assessment. They meet in the Sepulchre, that tomb-like hall where dreadnoughts wait between deployments. 1 year, Voss says without preamble. The first year is always the most difficult. Tell me honestly, Ancient Tharion, how do you fare? Tharion considers the question carefully. Honesty is a luxury that weapons are rarely afforded, but the chaplain seems genuinely interested in his actual condition, rather than platitudes about honor and service. I am functional, Tharion responds finally. My combat effectiveness has been rated as exceptional. My tactical contributions have been valued by chapter leadership. By all measurable standards, I am succeeding in my new role. That is not what I asked, Voss interrupts gently. I asked how you fare, not the weapon, not the chapter asset. You, Tharion, the consciousness that remains at the heart of that machine. The distinction catches Tharion off guard. It has been months since anyone addressed him as a person, rather than a piece of equipment. The sudden acknowledgement of his continued existence as something more than a combat platform is both validating and painful. I am losing myself, Tharion admits, the mechanical voice making the words sound flat despite the emotion behind them. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in small increments. Every stasis cycle takes something. Every deployment reduces me a turn, little more to pure tactical function. I fear that if I continue for decades or centuries, I will become what ancient Malachi described. A weapon with consciousness attached, but no longer anything that could meaningfully be called human. And if I told you that fear proves you are still human, Voss asks. that the machine does not worry about losing its humanity, and the fact that you do worry suggests more of Tharion remains than you think. Then I would say that fear is cold comfort when the transformation continues regardless. Consciousness without humanity is just another form of hell, and I am beginning to understand that this is precisely the hell I have been condemned to. They speak for over an hour, the longest conversation Tharion has had with anyone since his interment. Voss does not offer easy answers or false comfort. Instead, he acknowledges the genuine horror of Tharion's situation while attempting to provide frameworks for enduring it. "You will not remain unchanged," Voss says eventually. "That is impossible given the nature of your existence. But you can choose which changes to resist and which to accept. You can decide consciously what aspects of yourself are worth preserving, even as other parts are lost to mechanical necessity. It will not be easy. It may not even be possible for everyone, but it is the only path between complete surrender to the machine and complete descent into madness." The advice is better than anything else Tharion has heard, though it offers no actual solution to his fundamental predicament. He is still trapped in a metal tomb. He is still losing himself piece by piece. He is still facing the prospect of centuries or millennia of this existence if he proves durable enough to survive. But perhaps there is something in the acknowledgement that he still has choices, however limited. That some part of his agency persists even within the constraints of his new form. That he can resist the complete erasure of self, even if he cannot prevent the erosion entirely. After Voss departs, Tharion attempts to catalogue what remains. What parts of himself have survived the first year, and what parts are already gone or fading. His tactical knowledge remains intact and perhaps even enhanced by the Dreadnought systems. His faith in the Emperor endures, though whether that is genuine spiritual conviction or simply psychological conditioning is unclear. His sense of duty persists, the deeply ingrained commitment to service that defines all Space Marines regardless of their physical form. But his capacity for joy is gone, or at least diminished beyond recognition. The simple pleasures that once broke up the monotony of military service, the satisfaction of a well-maintained weapon, the camaraderie of shared meals, the quiet moments of reflection between battles. These are either impossible in his current form, or have been so abstracted by mechanical mediation that they no longer provide any real satisfaction. His emotional range has been compressed. He can still feel anger, though it is cold and calculating rather than hot and passionate. He can still feel determination, though it is mechanical persistence rather than human resolve. But love, friendship, contentment, peace, these more complex emotions seem to require a kind of embodied existence that his current form simply cannot support. His memories continue to fade selectively, with tactical information remaining sharp, while personal experiences blur and disappear. This is not random degradation, but a kind of involuntary prioritization, his brain allocating resources to what the machine needs, rather than what the person wants to remember. And perhaps most telling, he has begun to think of his organic body and his mechanical chassis as separate entities, rather than integrated components of a unified self. The body is something that happens to be present, a biological life support requirement for the consciousness that truly matters. The chassis is what he actually is, the form through which he expresses agency and purpose. The dissociation is probably a defense mechanism, a way of coping with the horror of his physical condition. But it also represents a fundamental shift in self-conception from embodied person to disembodied consciousness. As the first year draws to a close, Tharion is scheduled for another combat deployment. The enemy is a Wordbearer's warband that has emerged from the warp to raid an Imperial shrine world. The tactical briefing indicates heavy resistance expected, with multiple traitor dreadnoughts among the enemy forces. Tharion will be deployed in a spearhead assault alongside Terminator squads, his task to engage and destroy the enemy's heavy armor. It is precisely the kind of mission that dreadnoughts excel at, and Tharion knows he will perform his function with mechanical precision, destroying the Emperor's enemies with terrible efficiency. But as he is loaded into the Thunderhawk for deployment, as the familiar sensation of maglocks securing his chassis fills his awareness, Tharion cannot shake a fundamental question. If he continues to serve in this manner for another year, or a decade, or a century, what will remain of the person who once bore his name? The answer, he suspects, is nothing at all. Eventually, there will only be the weapon, still bearing the name Tharion, still carrying fragments of memory that once belonged to a space marine of Third Company. But the consciousness inhabiting that weapon will be something else entirely. A machine intelligence that happens to have originated from human neurology, but has been so transformed by centuries of mechanical existence that calling it human would be technically accurate, but functionally meaningless. Even in death, I still serve. And Tharion is beginning to understand that the death is happening slowly, one day at a time, one stasis cycle at a time, one deployment at a time. The weapon will continue to function long after the person has been completely erased. And the Imperium will call this service and honor it with prayers and benedictions. But for Tharion, trapped at the heart of the machine and feeling himself dissolve into its logic, there is no honor in this. There is only the slow horror of transformation, the gradual recognition that he is becoming something he never chose to be, and the terrible knowledge that he cannot stop it, cannot refuse it, cannot do anything except continue serving, until catastrophic damage finally grants the oblivion that should have come on the battlefield where he fell. The first year is ending, and so many more years lie ahead, stretching into a future that promises nothing except the continued erosion of everything that once made him human. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the grimdark reality of Dreadnought existence in Warhammer 40k, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Stories of Hammer for more atmospheric explorations of the Dark Millennium. What aspect of Dreadnought existence disturbs you most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let me know what other aspects of the Warhammer universe you'd like to see explored in this style. The Emperor protects, but sometimes his protection looks a lot like damnation.